Hi, this is Reverend Thomas William Gardner, and I know a lot of people have trouble getting to church, but this is a short story. And this particular story is something that doesn't happen all the time. I may have a dream something like this once or twice a year, or I may have a dream like this once every 3 or 4 years, but every so often I have a dream. And it's not a dream that's like, boy, that was a crazy dream. That was where you ate the wrong food and you said, boy, I had some really strange dreams last night. It wasn't like that. In fact, a couple nights ago, I had a hard time breathing. And it doesn't happen to me all the time, but I tend to have a situation in January and February and in June where something happens with the air and I have some problems. And then I get through it, and we get medicine and everything, and I do a lot better. But I was having a spell, and I've got a I've got a nebulizer, and it was electric, and I'm doing the thing there with my lungs, and I'm having a hard time just getting any breath at all. And I'm saying to the Lord, should I get into the hospital right now? Should I go into emergency? And I do the breathing treatment, and this breathing treatment, you could tell it really took. But what it really kind of was, I was in awful shape, and I went to just being in bad shape. And bad shape is better than awful, so it was an improvement, and I could tell it was an improvement. And I thought, well, it's just going to get probably a little bit better. And I said to myself, Lord, I said, I pray to you all the time. No, I didn't. It's something I do a lot, especially at this age, and especially, the last 20, 25 years. I pray so much. And I said, Lord, a lot of my friends are going on now. And it's hard to watch, and it hurts. Am I doing the right things? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? I'm not off course, am I? Am I preaching the word? Am I helping other people? I care, but I don't have any answers. I'm just a vessel. Lord, help me to do the right things. And I said, Lord, I guess I'm not supposed to go into emergency tonight, right? I said, okay. I fell asleep. And Jesus came. I know a lot of people debate this. They'll say, well, Jesus can't physically come to the world right now. Lighten up. Jesus came, and he was a vision. It was a dream. And don't short Jesus. Jesus can do anything. So he comes to me, and he says, and I see him, and I know it's Jesus. He said, well, what did he look like? Well, he wasn't that tall. He wasn't that short. I think he was a little bit taller than me. He was slimmer than me. And he had a white robe on that was trimmed in blue, beautiful blue. And when I saw him, he said, well, how'd you feel? Were you scared? No, I wasn't scared. It was Jesus. It was like I was comfortable. You ever been comfortable and you think back to the times and you loved your mother very much? And you're with your mother in the room, and you decided that you saw her take a nap, and you go, Mom's okay. Mom's with me. And I'm comfortable. This is good. Things are quiet. I'll take a nap or two. Then we'll get up, we'll talk. And you just feel peace because you're with Mom. Well, when I saw Jesus, I had peace. I thought, wow, this is great. And Jesus says to me, he says, come with me. And I said, okay, all right. I've got something to show you. I thought, wow, he's got something to show me. And all of a sudden, we're on the other side of the world. And I don't know where it was. I know that it was jungle-like and forest-like and hilly. And I looked down, and in the sand, in this jungle place, there was some sand. And in this sand was, it was a building. And the building, I could see part of it, and it was really, really long, and some of it was buried. And I said, Lord, this is really a large building, right? And nobody seems to know it's even here. And he goes, yeah. He goes, yes. And I go, it's enormous. I said, what did it look like when it was, brand new and finished? What did it look like? He says, you want to see? And I said, yeah. And all of a sudden, I looked back at it, and there it was. It was magnificent. It was so big and beautiful and shiny. And it was just made so well and so perfect. And it was old, ancient, old. And I thought, it's so beautiful. And I was looking at it, and I said, Lord, this is beautiful. This is so beautiful. He said, come with me, I got something to show you. And so all of a sudden, we went to another place. And we were in the same type of jungle with sand and up and down hills, but it was a different place. And I couldn't tell you if it was Afghanistan or it was Turkey or Pakistan, or I don't know where it was. It was on the other side of the world. I know that. Maybe it was around Egypt. I don't know. And he says, look. And I looked, and there was part of a monument. It was a statue monument, and I said, I can only see part of it. I can see the side, and it's metal, what I see, and it's black. And I said, Lord, what did this look like when it was brand new? He says, would you like to see? And I said, yes. And all of a sudden, I turned from looking at him, and I looked, and it was well over 100 feet tall. And at the bottom of it, it was stone. And the legs were stone, but then they were covered over with metal. And it was like he was some kind of great warrior, soldier or something. And he shined. And it was so big that you could walk in the bottom of the stone, and you could walk up into the statue, well over 100 feet tall. And I said, this is just fantastic. And I was wondering, I said, who is he? What is he? What did he do? What is he? Does he represent God? What is this? And it was just so beautiful. And the Lord says, I've got something else to show you. And I thought, wow, wasn't that enough? Why is he showing me a building and a monument? And then all of a sudden we're someplace else. And I said, Lord, I don't understand. And it was a building, but it wasn't just a building. It had something to do with the Jewish religion, I believe. And it was like a building that housed things. I don't know if it was the building that David drew and his son went out and his son built it. I don't know if that's what it was or if it was something else. But it was enormous, and actually what I was looking at was an enormous mess. And I said, Lord, what did this look like when it was brand new? You want to see? Yes, I'll show you. And all of a sudden I saw this, and it was so beautiful. And there was gold, and there were places to stand, and it was magnificent. And it was unbelievably big, so big. Remember the building that was constructed on the other side of the wall where the people cry and everything? It might have been that, or it might have just been the place where, the Ark of the Covenant was at one time placed. And I don't know what it was, but the ancient building was restored, and it was gorgeous. Whatever building it was, it was gorgeous. And he didn't explain. He just wanted me to see. Remember, he said, I've got something I want to show you. And I was staring at it and looking at it and trying to figure it out. I had so many questions. I couldn't get any of them out. And he says, we need to go someplace else. I said, okay. Now, later on, I wasn't able to define it like that, but as time went on, I realized in the next 24 hours that was 3 restorations of ancient sites. 3 restorations of ancient sites. Now, had I been reading about anything like that? No, I've been totally in different places in the Bible. So this was totally where my dream, when Jesus came to me, where Jesus wanted to take me. And remember what I asked him before that. I was praying to Jesus. I said, am I on the right track? Am I doing the right things? And he came to me and he says, I want to show you something. Now, later on, I found out, my wife said, you finally got to sleep, and I couldn't sleep, and I was looking over at you. And she said, you were twitching, turning, moving your head, and you were talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I said, boy, I was in a deep sleep. She says, oh, yeah, you were. And so he said, I have someplace else to take you. And he took me, and we are all of a sudden in a war scene. And this time, we walked up to a giant screen. And the giant screen, it was like a giant movie screen, but not as big as the ones, not like the Jumbotron or anything like that. It was just, excuse me, just a large screen. And we walked into the screen, and there we were on the other side. And bullets were flying, and grenades were going off, and cannons were around, and tanks were around, and trucks were around, and it was hilly, and it was sandy. And a little boy, a 12-year-old boy, skinny little boy with coal black wavy hair, really thick, and he had like a tunic on, and he takes Jesus' hand. He says, come with me, come with me. And I took Jesus' other hand, and I bent down because, all the artillery. Of course, Jesus didn't bend down. What do you have to bend down for, And the little boy was down like this, and he says, I want to show you something. I want to show you something. And we said, what? And I said, what? And he says to Jesus, he says, over there, those men over there are trying to kill those men over there because they want something that they have. But those men won't give it up. They'll die first. And he said, this has been going on for a long, long time. For days, this has been going on like this. And there were grenades going off and shells going off and fire over here and fire over there. And it was very, 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 very loud. And I looked over at Jesus and I said to him, can you do something about this? And he said, yes. And I said, oh, wow. And I looked, and he looked, and I said, what are they fighting over? I mean, what's so important? He said, oh, this goes on everywhere. Oh. He says, it's time to go. I said, it's time to go. And I thought to myself, I asked him if he could do something about it, and he said yes. And then he says, it's time to go. And I guess that's a good answer, but it wasn't the answer I was looking for. And he was already showed me so many things. And so we leave. And as we leave and we're moving back out of the screen and we're going to the other side, I look back and the little boy's got shot. And he got shot to the head. And he goes down, and I know he died. And I saw that last thing as I leave. And all of a sudden, I'm in a backyard. Now, it's my backyard, but it's not the backyard I have right now. It's outside. It's Ohio, Buckeyes. But there I am, and I'm walking around, and I'm trying to ponder the whole thing. And in my mind, days have passed. And I'm trying to put that all together of what had just happened. And Jesus comes back to me. And my wife says, well, how far away was he when he came? I said, I always notice him about 12, 15 feet away. I don't see him in the distance coming. There he is. And he says, come with me. I've got something to show you. I said, okay, Lord, great. And he says, you remember the war place, the battlefield? And I said, yes. He says, we're going back to the battlefield. I said, oh, okay. He says, we're going to find that little boy. And he says, we're going to show him something. I said, Lord, the little boy's dead. I saw him die. And he says, I know. I'm going back to raise him up. And I said, Lord, if you raise him up, this has been a lot longer than it was for Lazarus. He's been dead a long time. He said, I'm going back to raise him up. I saw us. Great. So we go back, and there we are. And everything's like it was, and the shooting's going on, and the little boy's laying in the street, and they're shooting over him and running past him, and he's just laying in the street dead, bloody. Nobody cared about him. Just laying there. And I said to myself, they're treating him like garbage, like he has no worth at all. And it's hard. It's hard to look at. And Jesus starts walking over towards him. The bullets are flying. And I'm saying, well, I'm walking beside Jesus. Because what do I care if a bullet hits me? What do I care if a grenade hits me? I'm with Jesus. I'll be with him. So, big deal. Let them do what they want to do. I'm walking right beside Jesus. Of course, nothing hits us. There isn't anything that hits us. He walks over to the little boy and he goes down to his knees. And he bends down and he grabs the little boy's hand. And he puts his hand in his hand. And I bend over and I'm watching. I don't go down to my knees. I don't stand straight up. I'm bending over and watching, which is pretty natural, right? And he says to him, he said, little boy, it's time to get up now. I think those were the very words. And he goes to stand. Jesus goes to stand. The little boy gets up and he stands with him. And there's no blood on him. There's no shot. He's restored and he's looking up at Jesus. Well, the soldiers over here see it. And I remember focusing on the one soldier especially, and he drops his rifle and he shouts out, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. And the other overhears a voice. He says, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. Then he overhears a voice. And then the other side. And all the firing and all the fire and all the explosions and all the tanks and everything's quiet. And they start saying, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. And they start chanting, Jesus, 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 Jesus. And it turns into a roar. It turns into a chant. And I'm standing there and I'm looking around and people are coming out from behind buildings, and they're coming out from behind tanks, and they're coming out from behind trucks, and they're coming out from behind cars, and they're standing there, and they're chanting Jesus, Jesus, and they're crying, and some of them are going down to their knees, and they're bowing, and Jesus, 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 and this goes on with Jesus. And then I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking. And then it remembered as we started to leave. I said to Jesus, I said, can you do anything about this? And he said, yes, but he didn't do anything. And then he said to me, I've got something to show you. We're going back to that place, the battlefield. And I said, okay, great. That's great. Wonderful. And it hit me. I expected, Jesus to put up his hands and he'd say, do this or do that, or he'd say stop and all the, this, I am Jesus, or no, he didn't say a word to them. He said a word to me. He said a word to the little boy. But once they saw Jesus and they saw that little boy raise up in the desert and he was restored, it all hit him. What we're doing is all wrong. We're all wrong. We are all wrong, and we have done this in front of the sight of Jesus. And they broke down, and they saw their sin, and they didn't want a war. And I thought, without Jesus saying a word, without him saying a word, the war was over. And I thought, how powerful is he? And then whoosh. This time, I'm back in my own bedroom. And I'm saying, what just happened? And my wife says, you okay? And I said, how you feeling? I said, oh, a lot better than I did, 4 hours ago, 5 hours ago. But I said, I'm doing a lot better. And I says, I've got something to tell you. And she said, what's that? I said, I just had the strangest dream. The strangest dream. And I told her. And my daughter comes in a little bit later. And I said, I don't know about why I saw the restoration. I haven't been, reading verses about restoration. And then I pulled this up, and she read some verses to me, and I thought, oh my word. In Isaiah 61:4, they will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. And they will renew the ruins and the cities that have been devastated for generations. And your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. And it goes on. There's more verses like that. And I go, I understand those verses. I know they were talking about this, that, or the other thing, but as a whole, now I understand. He can restore. He can rebuild. He can change everything. And he doesn't even have to say a word if he doesn't want to, because he's Jesus. Now, people will say to you, well, that was some kind of dream. Boy, you had a dream. It's not like that. I have a relationship. I'm not perfect. In the sermon before this, we talked about Jacob, and Jacob was a deceiver. And there's people out there that they've done things in their lives that they're not proud of. But Jesus can work with that if you're willing to buy in. If you're willing to take him in as your Lord and Savior. A lot of people will say to you, well, I've never had Jesus come to me. Have you prayed every day? Have you prayed for your loved ones in the church 4 and 5 times a day? Have you asked Jesus to make you better and help you? Have you done that? Have you been to church? I don't know. It's sure not for me to judge. Believe me, I'm just a messenger. And I'm not the brightest guy you'll ever meet. But I really do have a relationship with God. And it really is special. And he really does show me things, reveal things. And one time I said, after my father died, and God revealed a whole lot of things to me and to the family and the people around us. And I said, Lord, why do you show me things like this? And he says, because I know that you'll tell everybody. Oh, I wanted to tell you that story. I hope it helped you. And God is a God of forgiveness. And he can use us as vessels. And he can use us in a mighty way. And the reality of it is, everything was on verse. Everything was biblical of what I said about Jesus. But I guess nowadays, a lot of people, they get so hung up with all the bad news, They get down, they get depressed. But God's a God of joy. Jesus is a Jesus of joy and happiness and love. And, when the devil's beating us down and he's hurting us and he's hurting our feelings and he's hurting us as people, we have to remember we won't be here very long. This is a short stay. We might as well be joyful as we can, happy as we can, and look for the joy in life and enjoy life. And Jesus can do that. If you were down and you were having a hard time breathing, and you're about ready to go to the hospital, you didn't know exactly what to do. And all of a sudden, like a really good friend, Jesus comes in, he says, come on, I've got something I want to show you. I want to show you. That's a relationship, right? How can you beat that? How can you beat that? Well, those are just some of my thoughts for the day. And it opens up a whole lot of questions, doesn't it? How tall was Jesus? How much did he weigh? What did he look like? What was his complexion? What color was his eyes? That's fun conversation, but that wasn't the point of the story. Relationship with Jesus. He might come to see you. Well, have a great day. And these are just some of my thoughts.